お待たせいたしました。これよりメドピアトラックでは、インディペンデント Vue.js コアチーム、エドアルド・サンマーティン・モローテ様によるセッション、Async State Management with Vue Router をお届けします。本セッションでは、AI 英語教材 AB シードを開発、個人の可能性を最大化する株式会社グロービー様の提供により、英語から日本語への同時通訳をご利用いただけます。ご希望の方はお席に置いてある受信機をお使いください。なお、受信機はセッションが終了したら、本トラックの外には持ち出さず、そのまま席に置いてくださるようお願いいたします。また、Vue Fes Japan 2024では、4つのトラックを同時進行しています。このメドピアトラックについては、ハッシュタグ、Vue Fes メドピアでどんどん感想を共有してください。Mr. Martin Morote, are you ready?Yeah. それでは皆さん、どうぞ温かい拍手でお迎えください。
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Eduardo. I'm also known as Postba on GitHub and Twitter. I'm the author of Pinia, Vue Router, Viewfire, and other small libraries about Vue. And I have been part of the Vue core team for a very long time now. I think it's about 8 years. So it's starting to, I'm close to the 10 years mark. And during this journey, I have encountered many different projects, and I have tried to solve many different issues I have faced. And most of them, I solved them, except for one, data fetching. And it's not like data fetching is my nemesis or anything like that, but every time I've seen data fetching implemented in one project, it's implemented different from the previous one. Every project has its own abstraction they built. So there is no standard way to build it, and we have no standard way to build it. So let me show you the most common ways of implementing data fetching. The most common one, by far, is when your application is client-side only, so you don't have server-side rendering, and you use a watch on whatever source of truth you need to fetch. In this case, we're doing the route. And it's very, very simple, and it's a very effective way to fetch data. On top of that, it's very easy to customize because it's just in the component. So we can add loading state very, very easily. It's very natural. The same way, we can add error state, and this is because we are in the component itself. The code is located in the component. So we can use the component data, and we don't need to learn anything new from Vue. It's just Vue API. So anything new from Vue Router. But it has two major downsides. It's client only, so you can't do SSR at all with this approach. The data fetching only happens when the component is mounted, and it will not be awaited on the server, so we run a blank page. And honestly, it's quite verbose. We can solve this with a composable. We'll see that later, but still very long. You're not gonna do this multiple times over the project in multiple pages. So if you need SSR, what you usually do is move onto suspense. You can't rely on suspense. You don't have to, but you can. Suspense is simple and intuitive, which is a very good point. And it works without the router, which sometimes people forget, but you can build an application without the router too. But it has a big downside, is that it depends on mounting the component. Let me explain you why. We are forced to have cascade fetching. So any nested await will have to wait for the parent before starting to fetch. There is no way to preload, so there is no way to tell the component, hey, start fetching the data, and once you mount, you don't need to fetch it again. There is no way to do that. And there is no watching. There is no automatic refresh on the data if the URL is changing, because we need to mount the component again. We can use a key on the router view, but that means that you mount the whole page again. And if your page is heavy, this is not really something you want to do. And then we have composables. Composables like Pina Colada, Vue Query, Swerve, or Nuxt, use fetch, or async data as well. So it's feature rich. For example, in Pina Colada, it comes with cache, request deduplication, optimistic updates, and many more. The limit is really your imagination with your composable. It's also very concise because you're putting you're abstracting the complexity away. We need to use, in this case, use query, and we're good to go. Usually it supports SSR too, right? So in the case of Pina Colada, you don't need to do anything. It just works. In the case of use fetch, you use await, and it works with suspense. And last but not least, we have navigation guards. So the implementation might change a little bit on every single project, but the general idea is like this. We define a custom meta property where we have some fetching logic, and we consume it in a navigation guard. And that should also put that data somewhere global, so it can be used by the components. Quite a few requisites. And because we're in a navigation guard, we have a major advantage compared to the other solutions, is that we can modify the navigation. So if we want to render some 404 or redirect because the user is not authenticated, we can really easily do that. And we can do it in one single place too. Also because we are integrating into the navigation itself, we are sure to have more realistic metrics around navigation. So that means that we know which pages are really taking more time to load, because if we don't have that, page loads, but it actually just still loading the rest of the page. So it didn't really fully load. And lastly, we should be able, in the near future, although I have been saying this for 2 years, because this API has been in the works by browsers for, I think, 4 years now. Now it's called Navigation API. It was called App History at some point. It will allow you to change the browser UI spinner. So the one that is native right now, you should be able to hook into that, and you will get a UI loading by default. But navigation guards have also some downsides. We can use component data. We cannot use component data. And we need to store the data somewhere global, like Pinia, for example. But the whole idea is that this approach is different from the other threes. And these 4 examples allow me to say that, first, data fetching is a complex topic. It has been solved partially in different ways, and almost any application that you build needs it. But they all have a partial implementation. And yet, there is no standard way to do it, right? Every project ends up selling on a different abstraction that works more or less for them, and then you move into another project, they have another abstraction, you adapt, and sometimes you have different needs too. And the main drawback of these solutions is the lack of code collocation, so something like the suspense and watch, of data fetching logic with the page component, while still being navigation aware, still being able to redirect to the login page, 404, etc. To the point that we ask ourselves, is this even possible? And so today I'm excited to introduce what I believe could become the future of data fetching. It's what I call data loaders for Vue, not for everything. So to get started, we have a plugin that we install to the Vue app, and it's going to add a navigation guard to the router. So that would handle the data fetching for us. Then we can start defining the data loaders with this define loader function. So it's similar to define store in Pinia. It returns a composable. It can be used in any component. And I want you to notice a few things, sorry. We have 2 scripts, okay? This is not a mistake. We have one for the setup, and the other one is the global one, where we define the loader. So we define the fetching logic there inside of one function, in this case, and we try to use global state for this. And the only global state that we know for sure is the URL. Usually, this is a best practice because it means that your page will be able to render again based on the URL. So very good best practice. And then we return any data we want to expose, in this case, the user. So as I said, define loader returns a composable. And we are exporting this composable, as you can see. This allows us to do 2 things. The first is letting the router know that this page, because we're on a page component, is aware of this loader. So it should load the data in this loader. And the second is to use it anywhere. Since we're exporting it, we can import it in any other component, and it will also work. Since we're also declaring the composable on the page, we can directly use it. So we can use the composable, and it returns a few properties. We have the data, so the return value that you have on the loader is loading, which is a Boolean state to know if you're still loading or not. Also works for refreshes in a moment. We have the error, which gives us access to promise rejections. And we'll see that more later in detail. And we have the reload, which allows us to manually reload the page without a navigation. Okay? So we can refresh the data, or rather reload. But here is when it starts to get interesting. We are navigation aware because everything runs in a navigation guard. So we can control the navigation outcome. If the loader throws an error, the navigation aborts, just like a normal navigation guard. But differently from regular navigation guards, we cannot just return a new location or return false. We have to use a navigation result. We have to wrap it, and we can either throw it or return it. Both will work. But that's not it. So navigation aware is not just about controlling the output of the navigation. It's also having consistency. And this is where it gets really interesting for data loaders. So in data loaders, by default, the data updates only once all the loaders for the page have resolved. So your UI won't display the new data on an old page, right? If you're still fetching for data and you have the old page, you won't have an inconsistent state. Of course, you can also do it in another way. But the idea behind this is that it avoids you to write all the granular loading spinners in multiple places of the page. You can handle the loading at the global state, okay, which is usually easier most of the time, without blocking you, by the way. So let me show you with a small demo. So first, I'm going to show you the basic client-side data fetching, which is here. So we have two fetchers going on. We're going to first fetch the profile information and then the follower count. This is using a watcher. If I go to my profile, I will see that first I have the information of the profile and the follower count appear afterwards. You will also notice on the URL that it changes right away, and then the profile information comes and then the follower count comes. This is a little bit problematic because if I go to different places at different times, it will be very inconsistent, and also it can create false hopes, having more followers than I actually have, which I don't want to. So now I'm going to show you the data loader version. You will notice right away that we have this blue line at the top. Maybe not, we cannot see it, I think.
It was there.
It was there, okay. So this is the global loading state. And you will see that if I go to another page, oops, I should have scrolled first. All the data comes in at the same time, okay? And the URL changes also at the same time. It's like a whole change at the same time. Everything is consistent. And so when we switch between profiles, we always have consistent data. So here, because the navigation is not over, I'm canceling the navigation and triggering a new one. But the thing is, we don't always want to block the navigation with the data loaders, right? So this is why we also have lazy loaders. So lazy loaders are done by setting the lazy true option on the loader. And they are still conveniently integrated with the data loaders. So a lazy loader is still triggered on each navigation, but it's not awaited. It doesn't block the navigation. As a consequence, as a result, it cannot change the navigation either, okay? Any thrown error will appear on the error property instead of cancel the navigation. But, and this is the best part, is that it still follows consistent updates. So let me show you with the same demo. if I can move. There we go. So, I said that this is the exact same demo. I have two data loaders here. One is for the information of the user, which is fast. It's like 500 milliseconds. And the second one is for the follower count, which takes around 2 seconds. If I make the follower count lazy, you're going to notice that it looks a lot like the watcher. Okay? The only difference is that the URL is going to change at the same time as the profile information. Now, because the information of the user arrives first, it doesn't block the navigation. It says, OK, it's fine to go to the page and display everything else. And it's up to you to define any granular loading state if you want. But the other case is interesting because the profile information loads faster. So here, the navigation is going to take 2 seconds. But the profile information didn't change until the navigation finished. Okay? So this is, it hides the complexity away from the composable. The data is somewhere while the navigation is happening. But if some error happens, if we don't end up on the page, you will not see an inconsistent state, which I think is very important and is one of the biggest difficult parts of partially implemented data fetching logic. So let's talk about why we want to use lazy data loaders. Lazy loaders are not are more about that slow data, but in reality, it's more about non-critical data. Okay, so in this example, we have two loaders. We have use artwork details, so like artwork for a museum, and use artwork related artist. So the first one is the critical data. The user came for that information, right? They want to see who did that painting, who did that sculpture, etc. It's also at the top, and the related artwork is at the bottom. So the second one, it's okay if it's not there when we arrive to the page. So we mark it as lazy. It has a few implications as well. The artwork details are always defined, right? Because we block the navigation. So we know that we don't have an undefined value. We don't need to handle this with a VE for loading state. We know the data is there. On the other hand, related artist can be undefined from a type perspective, so it's also typed. And the type reflects that, of course. And this is a very practical, in my opinion, way to distinguish between critical and non-critical data. And I like when things are pragmatic, and I think it connects very easily. A Boolean state to distinguish critical from non-critical that you can just set in one single line is really nice. And it's also very close to the user, to what the user expects and their experience. And it also brings another topic, error management. Since lazy loaders do not block the navigation, as I was saying before, any error that you throw will automatically appear in the error property. So that gives us the possibility to locally handle the error, like displaying some message of the error. But what about non-lazy loaders? So we can still define expected errors with the errors option. This way, the navigation still happens for these specific errors. So we have different syntaxes, of course. I'm just using the most simple one. But you have functions. You can also limit globally. It's more interesting. So the navigation still happens if there is an error, but only if the error is, in this case, an instance of my custom error. In this case, the data can also be undefined. You have to keep that in mind, because it means that we might have an error state initially. So we have the error locally, and we do the same as with lazy loader. We handle that locally. So we have a granular control over the state. All right, so, oh yeah, and you can also keep handling global errors with router on error. That works the same way. It hasn't been altered. We are still in a navigation guard, so everything that works already will keep working. So we have code collocation, we have navigation awareness, and we have consistent updates. We have also deduplication, lazy loading, and error management. But what about things like the cache, the optimistic updates, all the rich features I was talking about in the beginning for composables? So I have a small confession to make. there is no defined loader, actually. What I've been explaining so far is actually called defined basic loader. So it represents the baseline implementation for data loaders. It's just a function, which is, it cannot get simpler than that. And data loaders can also be integrated with all the libraries. So defined data loader will be the version for Pina Colada. And in this case, it's Pina Colada that is augmenting the data loader and bringing their own functionality to the data loader. So for example, in the case of Pina Colada, we have key. So we don't take a function as the argument, right? We take a whole object. And in this object, we have the key, which is going to allows us to define the cache. So we have a very smooth navigation. And the key gets the location as an argument, which is not part of Pina Colada, right? We have really a mix of the data loaders and Pina Colada. And then we can add custom options, for example, stale time, which allows us to keep or consider the data fresh for, in this case, 5 minutes. That way, if we refresh or if we run the loader again, we'll not fetch it. So it will be immediate. I think I will have some time later to show you that demo. And this feature is specific to Pina Colada, okay? It doesn't appear on the baseline implementation defined basic loader. And so, of course, we can also augment the composable. For example, Pina Colada has a refresh function, which is different from reload. Refresh will only conditionally fetch the information, only if needed, based on the stale time. So in the end, defined loader is a spec. It's not one implementation, it is a spec. Currently, we have 2 implementations. We have the simple one for very basic data fetching, which is defined basic loader. And we have a feature-rich one for more complex application with cache, deduplication, etc., with Pina Colada. But in the future, we can imagine other scenarios. We can imagine other implementations by other libraries like Vue Query, GraphQL, VueFire, and even WebSockets, why not? As long as you have a promise somewhere to return, that's the important part. So I've been mentioning this Pina Colada thing a few times, but I haven't really explained what it is. I'm not talking about a cocktail. I'm talking about this. Who has seen this before? A few hands. So Pina Colada is a library I have been working for the past year. Is built on top of Pina stores, and it brings the async to the state management, right? It's the layer of async state management solution that uses Pina stores. So Pina Colada works by itself without data loaders. You don't need to use data loaders to use Pina Colada. It even works without the router, by the way. But most applications who use this kind of solutions use the router as well. And I think it's a perfect companion for data loaders. So if you use it, please give it a try and let me know what you think. These are the links. And I think I have some time to show you a quick demo before the recap. I have to go back. This one. If I'm able to move the mouse, there we go. This is an art gallery, and it's using a real API, okay? So if I search, for example, for some artwork here, I'm going to say for Picasso, it's going to take some time. I can paginate the results. Everything is on the URL, which you cannot see. And then if I go back, the results, so the fetch is completely instant here. We still have this lazy load effect on the images, but that's just a CSS thing. And you can configure this, of course, as much as you want. But the idea is that when you know your data sources, you know how often they are updated, how often you need to refresh your data. So having a cache, a client-side cache, allows you to leverage or to reduce server-side load, but also to make your UI, UX much more snappy and fast. It feels really nice as a user. To go back, there we go. Okay, going back to the this is a summarize, to summarize the data loaders. So they are designed to be navigation aware, which is very important. So we can control the navigation. They are collocated with page components. So we have this idea of if I'm developing a page, I want to add the code that is related to the page on the same spot, which, by the way, is not really a limitation to the data loaders. This is really just a summary. There is so much more to cover, but that's what we have the documentation for. But it's navigation aware, collocated with page components. It's performant, so we have the duplication. And it provides a flexible API to handle the loading state globally, but also locally. It's designed to create a consistent user experience on your data fetching by delaying some of the updates. So, sorry. Please give it a try. Who has given it a try, the data loaders? Anybody? One person. Give it a try and let me know what you think. It's very close to being it's not a word, stable, production ready. I have been working on this for 2 years with some on and off, but it has been a long time of thinking and API. So give it a try. These are the links if you want to check anything. The slides are online, so I will just share it on Twitter after the talk. So you have the code for the demo, the slides, everything, okay? And last but not least, I want to just do a small ad. If you're interested into, so Pina Colada is actually the result of an exercise I started building in mastering Pina. It just got a little bit too complex and decided to move it to a library. So if you're interested in learning more advanced stuff with Vue, not just Pina, but also Vue, I have this Mastering Pina course on masteringpina.com. It is in English. I suppose we are working on some subtitles for many languages. But if you have bought the course, or if you have contributed to Vue Router or Pina, if you have sponsored me, please come to see me and I will give you a small pin as a thank you. And that's it. ご清聴ありがとうございます。